He says, okay, I give up. Who is she? Now it's goofing. We're both of Chinese descent. We're both.
I knew we were related.
We're both. I've never said that before.
Hey, Inspired Moneymaker.
We've got a great episode for you today. We have not one guest, but two, which is why there are two of us here for the introduction. Meet my daughter, Christina.
Hi.
Today we're talking with Mark Victor Hansen. He is affectionately known as America's Ambassador of Possibility. He's an internationally renowned speaker, co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul with Jack Canfield. He's joined by his wife,
Crystal Dwyer Hansen.
Crystal Dwyer Hansen, who is a transformational life coach. She's a wellness and nutrition expert and an international speaker in her own right. Together, they've written a book called Ask, The Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny. And they're both entrepreneurs as well as philanthropists who believe in the power of giving. In this episode, you're going to learn why asking questions might be the key to achieving your dreams, how to push yourself to ask bolder questions, and if we want to be like Mark, why we should consider setting 100-year goals. Before we continue, please hit subscribe right now so that you don't miss interviews like this one. And one last thing, my sincere apologies to Mark. I had a little bit of a snafu with the video capturing. He actually got a little cropped out. But I'm going to look at the positive. As they say, it's better done than perfect. And this is probably the only interview you will ever see of Mark and Crystal where Mark is partially cropped out. So again, my apologies to Mark and everyone. I think the content is still going to be great. Let's get inspired with Mark Victor Hansen and
Crystal Dwyer Hansen.
Mark and Crystal, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Andy. We're so happy to be here with you.
We're honored to be on, sir.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
I'll go first. I'm 9 years old. I desperately want a bicycle. My father, I didn't understand, didn't have the money to buy this exorbitant bike. Today, like a Trek is $4,000. That's what I wanted equivalently. And then it was $750. So I finally got him down to saying, can I have it if I earn it myself? And he said, yeah, go for it. Never thinking I could turn around that much money. And I became the top greeting card salesman in America I read a Boy Scout Life magazine that said you could sell greeting cards and consignment. My mother was a great saleswoman, storyteller, told me to go around to the neighbors and say, I'm a cute little kid in snow back outside of Chicago, Waukegan, Illinois, and saying, I'm earning my own bicycle. Would you like to invest one box of Christmas cards or two? And in 1 month, I sold 376 boxes of Christmas cards. I ultimately got the book Bike come spring. How's that?
It's a happy ending.
Yeah.
That's very
painful,
happy.
but a lot of work.
And how about you, Crystal?
So my earliest memory of money was that when I turned 5 years old, my parents decided that one of our gifts for our birthdays would be we'd get the number of dollars, according to the years that we were becoming. So I got $5. And I just remember being so enchanted because I thought that was so much money. I had a whole $5 bill. And then I remember going out with my brother and sister and, typical. So my older brother, he's the eldest. So I'm out playing with my brother and sister after my celebration and party or the next day or something. And he said, let's take that money and go to the corner store and buy candy. We can buy candy. So he convinced me, back then we could walk anywhere. We grew up in a small town. So we went to this little store called Bybie's. And I don't know, I think we spent a good chunk of my of my $5, but we each got my older brother, my older sister, and I got a whole bag full of candy, all the penny candies and the $5 candy bars, the 5-cent candy bars, and came home with these bags of candy. And I remember my mother sitting down with me and telling me that was not a wise way to spend my money. And I can't let people talk me out of, doing the right thing with my money. So I guess it was a good early childhood money lesson.
It sounds sweet and sugary. It's harder to get the 5-cent candy these days.
I know, right? I loved that penny candy. Oh my goodness, wasn't that great?
So I'm so excited to be speaking to the Queen and King of Denmark today.
Oh boy, you've been listening and reading our stuff. Goodness gracious, most people are going to go, I thought they were in Denmark.
I think that I read a Facebook post. It looked to be an 8th anniversary Facebook post that Mark wrote that described how you two met. Maybe you could share that with our listeners.
I'll let Crystal go first. She'll do the first part. I'll do the second part. If fair enough, Andy?
Okay.
Fair enough.
So it's funny, Andy, because I was in the middle of writing my first book called Pure Thoughts for Pure Results. I had a really thriving coaching practice in Scottsdale, just had recently gotten divorced. And I was writing this book, and my mom called me one day and she said, I just got this email invitation to an Author 101 event in LA. She goes, there'll be publishers and publicists there, and Mark Victor Hansen will be there. And I was like, oh, whoa, Mom, okay. And she goes, well, you've got to go. I'll watch the kids, just go. And I said, when is it? And she goes, it's the day after tomorrow. And I was like, oh, it's probably sold out. I doubt that I can get in. So I was kind of trying to talk my way out of it. And she said, just call. I'll watch the kids. Don't you worry about it. So I called and to see if there was any space left at the event. And strangely enough, in less than 5 minutes, the promoter of the event, the owner of the event, Rick Frischman, called me back personally and said, no, we're not sold out, Crystal. We'd love to have you come over. So I'm like, okay, this thing has a life of its own. I guess I'm going to this Author 101 event. So I'm at the VIP event a couple of days later. Mark had been the keynote speaker over a couple of days. And I'm talking to a speaking coach, and Mark's kind of in the corner surrounded by an entourage of people asking him questions. And so all of a sudden, this woman, I had made a deliberate decision that I was not going to drink because I was like, I'm all business. I'm going to be talking about my work and my business. This is very serious. And ironically, a woman standing next to me was while talking with her hands and whacked a whole glass of red wine on my white pants. So Mark must have been looking my way because all of a sudden he kind of broke out of his crowd and came over and he grabbed my hand and he goes, so sorry that happened. Here, let me help you find the club soda. And he kind of pulled me out of the room. And I was like, okay. And once we got out, we started talking. We found the club soda, and he just said, there's something about you that's just so interesting. He asked me what I did in my work, and he said, I really feel strongly that you have the ability to change a lot of lives, especially for women. And I'm starving. Would you like to go to dinner? And let's leave the place because otherwise I'll be surrounded all night by people just wanting 5 minutes. So I said, sure, let me go change my pants. And I got on the phone upstairs in my room with my mother. I said, how are the kids doing? I got to be quick because you're not going to believe it. I said, I'm going to dinner with Mark Victor Hansen. And she goes, I knew it. So I was like, Mom.
So my part of this is, as I said, two parts, is that we get to the greatest restaurant or most expensive in Hollywood, and there's like a line of 50 people at 9:30 at night. I go, oh boy, $100 bill won't get me in. I've just wasted my time coming to this place. But we trudged forward, and we didn't know any better. The guy at the gatekeeper, so to speak, he looks at us and looks at her and sees her beauty and just plutocratness just emanating out every pore of her being and says, okay, I give up. Who is she? Now, what I did was not really integrous, but boy, did it work. I said, you don't recognize her? Now his head is going through People magazine and InStyle and Vogue, and he can't pull out who she is. But he's sure she's a star because she's got this great star power, this wonderful auric image, the thing that Ralph Waldo Emerson said, who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear what you're saying. He says, okay, I give up. Who is she? Now it's goofing. We're both of Chinese descent. We're both
I knew we were related.
We're both I've never said that before. We're both of Danish descent. So I said, goofingly, she's a queen of Denmark. He said, no, she's not. Oh my gosh, she is. Wait a second. Who are you? I said, question. Who travels with a queen? He said, oh my gosh, you're the king. Hold on one second. And like that, we had the best table in the place, the chef serving us. And it was sort of it was meant to be, it was sort of a divinely orchestrated joke. But it worked out. It didn't backfire on me.
Are you always that rascally, Mark?
He gets rascally. He gets really rascally. He's starting to say this to the guy, and I'm laughing, and I'm like, he's so silly, because I could tell he was joking and being silly, but the guy, he just had the guy going, and all of a sudden the guy's like, oh, okay, hold on. And I didn't think he was really believing him. And all of a sudden he's like, come with me. And he put us in this really great place at the back. And he's like, the chef will be with you and let us know if there's anything we could do. And I'm like, I don't think we can tell him at this point. We were just kidding.
As for your question about rascally, I would say that my goal in life is to live in the joy of living. I mean, the goal is, how do you live to be happily ever after? And the book we wrote is, how do you find your destiny? My destiny is to live every moment to its max. So if you're going to do that, then you fulfill your destiny. And if that is rascally in your impression, in your eyes, in your concept, I accept.
Since you mentioned the word destiny, how do you explain all of this? Because each of you traveled very, unique paths on your own and just came to meet. And I guess the follow-up is, did you ever get to thank the woman who spilled the wine on you?
Yes. You know what's so funny? We did, Andy. She showed up for one of Mark's events a couple of years later, and she walked up to us and said, you know what? I think you should thank me for bringing you two together. She said, I'm the one who spilled wine on your wife. I think we were married by then or engaged. I spilled the wine on Crystal, and I think that's what made you guys meet. And we were like, it was so fun to meet her because it was such a destiny thing. I mean, honestly, Andy, I was making every excuse not to go to this event. And it's funny because, when I got there, I sort of felt this hum, this sort of buzz inside. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling where I get a lot of intuition about things. And I felt like something was happening, but I didn't know what. When I'm checking into the hotel, and I just couldn't put my finger on it, but I just thought, I'm just going to get the most out of this event, whatever this thing is, And we have some really interesting synchronicities. Like both of our first spouses were born on June 28th. We each have 3 brothers, and 2 of our 3 brothers are named Eric and Brian. And the Eric is the middle son, and the Bryans are the babies of the family. I mean, we have this Lincoln Kennedy stuff going on. It's really
one's a doctor and one's a lawyer.
Really
Brian,
strange.
So,
yeah.
Really,
this does not sound weird at all.
Yeah, no, not at all, right?
Happens to everybody.
Yeah.
And the point is, when I was single, when I asked myself, what do I want? I wrote down 267 things I needed in my ideal wife. I never told her until after we were married the values, the attributes, the qualities. And she's 267 out of 267. How's that?
Kudos to you for being specific in your goals.
Right.
So Ask, The Bridge from Your Dreams to Destiny, thank you for holding it, is the first book that you've written together. It's really interesting. I spent quite a bit of time with it last night and this morning. Oh, cool. I love the combination of the fable with real world stories and practical tips. What sparked the idea to put this project together?
Well, I think that Mark and I feel so blessed to just travel the world and meet so many amazing people under normal circumstances. We're always traveling, right?
I remember those days.
Yeah, right? And honestly, we love people. Everywhere we go, we make terrific friends. We have good friends all over the world. And so we're thankful for that. And what we see everywhere we go is that people have, probably more talent and ability than they'll use in 4 lifetimes, truly. People are so much more gifted than they realize. And we started asking ourselves, what is the thing that if we could help people, what's the difference between, people who achieve massive success and those who really keep falling short of it? And it came down to really one thing, if we could reduce it to one simple tool, and that is the ability to ask. And we say there are actually 3 channels through which you need to learn to ask. And those are ask yourself, ask others, and ask God. And if you follow those channels and ask the right questions in the right way, your life will start to open up and reveal to you this amazing destiny that is waiting for you.
I love that. And I love the sentiment from your book. You wrote, you were born with a destiny. Your job is to discover it. Once you discover your destiny and start to move toward it, you can manifest innumerable blessings for yourself and others. How did you figure out that the key is to ask questions? And then I like this part. to ask again and again and never stop asking?
Well, first of all, thank you for adoring our book, Reading the Fable, which she totally created. And we found out, as she said, we traveled to 80 countries, talked to about 7 million people, and we met all these great people that were professional, educated, nice attitude, but they succeeded below their privilege, below their potential. You know, they could be running a city, they could be running a giant corporation, church, temple, synagogue, whatever, if they just learn how to ask and answer that destiny. Because I think we believe, and I hope you do, that everybody's coded, Andy, at DNA and RNA at birth to do something great. But if you're told you're not good enough when you're a little kid, or when you're in school, or when you're in university, or when you're in work or in military, you get squished. And what we're saying is what we've gotten so many letters now from people that have read the book, came out in April and is rocking. And people are saying, hey, I went over it with my mastermind partner, my spouse, my best friend, my church partner, and I asked all the questions in the book, and it unveiled who I really am supposed to be. I know I'm trained as an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, but all of a sudden I found out that I am really supposed to do what you guys are teaching, bloom where you're planted and fulfill my destiny, because this isn't a dress rehearsal. You're here, even though we're all temporarily locked in on a cocoon of COVID.
Mark, since you wrote 1 Minute Millionaire, like, you've studied those who have been able to amass financial success, how does that fit with the asking questions and finding one's purpose and finding success?
Oh, I love it. So the first line I wrote in 1 Minute Millionaire, which sold 3.6 million, and it's amazing, as we've done literally now, this is 118th podcast in just a few months. People say, I'm a millionaire. I made $20 million because I read your book. And I go, whoa. I mean, that was a dream, because the first line I wrote is, ask yourself, I said, everyone's got one right, perfect, easy, and acceptable way to make $1 million. There's not just one way to make $1 million. I said, there's 1 million ways to make $1 million. You got to ask yourself, what is your way to do it? And as you know, we quoted the great talk that was given 6,000 times, found at Temple University by Dr. Russell Conwell, called Acres of Diamonds, where he said there's acres of diamonds in every mind, M-I-N-D, and you got to M-I-N-E your M-I-N-D to get it. And I never said that before, but I like it. And there's one woman who worked, it was a time of Abe Lincoln, came to the meeting, his secretary, and she'd been pinning papers together and bled all over the papers, and said, there's got to be a better way to do it. And Conwell says, I can do it. And we're teaching in our book, God, what's your destiny for me? God, what's your destiny for me? 400 times before you go to sleep. She did that and invented the paperclip. Now, you and I have had a paperclip since before you were born, I'm sure. Well, if you go downtown Philadelphia, there's a paperclip that goes up 6 stories dedicated to that woman. And what we're saying is, a little idea can make you vastly rich. And so I taught in that book, I define entrepreneur different than anyone. I say, find a problem, and God knows there are a lot of them. Find a problem, fix it, scale it, and make a vast profit. Would you agree with that, Andy?
It sounds logical to me. It sounds easy.
Well, by the way, if I said it was hard, then nobody would do it. So once you get on the travel, like, I thought speaking would be easy. And it, for me, because I wanted to do it so desperately after I'd gone bankrupt, it was a perfect right livelihood. And Crystal's got her own experience after getting married a little bit young. Okay,
before we dig into that, I want to ask Crystal, because I really did enjoy your fable. I started skimming, and this was late last night. Before I knew it, I had finished the fable. So it kept my attention. I didn't fall asleep, and I was pretty tired. I noticed that Michaela clearly was not after the money. She was pursuing her purpose first, and then the riches came as a natural byproduct.
That's right.
So I'm just curious, again, where does the money fit in part? That's my question.
Right. And really, if you look at Michaela's journey, because I wrote it honestly as every woman and every man's journey. And Michaela starts out, she's basically, an indentured servant in a rock quarry, lifting these heavy stones every day from one place to another. And she's lost all hope. And that's where a lot of people are. I think life feels like we're lifting heavy stones every day from one place to another. And so I wanted this to be every woman and every man's journey. But in Michaela's case, when she had lost hope and she didn't have any answers and just know where to go, then she falls into this, exhausted sleep, and the being comes to her and takes her on this incredible journey. But he admonishes her in this very important wisdom and saying, the key is to start asking and never stop asking, essentially. And so the minute Michaela goes from her hopeless, helpless journey where she's lost her parents, she's lost her home, she's lost everything that mattered to her, and she's at the bottom of her life, lifting rocks every day, that message to her, she woke up with just a glimmer of hope that something miraculous had happened. She felt it, that idea that if she started asking. Now, so she approached the next day with a little more wonder, with more questions. Her mind started inquiring. She started looking around her and wondering and asking. And as she starts to ask more and more and more, the answers start to come, the realizations start to come, the boundaries of her life start to move outward. Suddenly her life is expanding in this incredible way, and she just keeps asking. And then she gets more messages through her dreams that help guide her, as you know, Andy. But the key was to keep asking herself, asking others, and asking God. And as she did that, everything was revealed. And when we start asking, so we're continually getting guidance, then we will end up in alignment with our purpose. And absolutely, don't just go for the money, because you might end up with a lot of money. You might get what you want and be miserable. Make sure that you're asking the questions that allow you to live every day in joy. The purpose of life is joy. I mean, sure, you're going to have days that are hard and doesn't feel, it's a grind or whatever, but there's still this sense of purpose, that keeps you going. And so that's why we believe this asking journey is the most important journey you'll ever take, because getting clarification on all of those things is the most important thing you'll do for your happiness, your well-being, and to find that ultimate destiny path that you're meant for.
Dreams were certainly central to Michaela's story. That's where she got clarity, and that's what advanced these ideas and the, motivation to ask questions. Did any of this story come to you in a dream?
Well, okay, so I love when people ask me that. Actually, I have these really profound dreams in my life that have always guided me, and I feel so thankful that I have them. Those dreams aren't exactly my dreams, but they, and Michaela's life is not exactly my life, but I took a lot of the elements of my dreams and put them into Michaela's dreams, because my dreams have guided me in similar ways. And so I think it's really important to be intentional to pay attention to your dreams. Not all dreams. Some dreams are just processing and things like that. But I feel like there is a level of dreaming especially when you start to take time to do more meditation, mindfulness, get into those quiet spaces of your being and your mind, because our minds are really not separate from the universal wisdom and from God, really. I mean, all spiritual doctrine basically points to the idea that God is in us and we're in God and God is in us. And so there is no separation that most of us perceive that God is some faraway, guy in the sky, but that for us, at least, what I know is that God truly, and through all scripture and everything I believe in, is that God only can act through you and in you. And so, having that connection, having that peacefulness inside of you and going to that place of mindfulness. And you can experience that so much in nature. It's like Emerson's essay on nature talks about, like, you when you experience nature, you're experiencing an aspect of God, because the creation of it is so beautiful. But are we taking the time to do those things for ourselves? That is, the time we take. Mark and I spend an hour every morning in a prayer and meditation time asking questions, reconnoitering, asking, are we on track? Are priorities in alignment with our highest purpose? All of these things that keep us on track, and we hold each other accountable. That's the best time we can spend. That time with yourself, connecting to all that there is so important.
I love hearing that connection. I mean, I probably I don't pay enough attention to my own dreams, but I'm always very impressed when I hear creative people, musicians in particular, tell me that they heard, like they dreamed about a song and they woke up and had to write it down. They heard the melody exactly how they now play it, but they're like, this song actually came to me in a dream, and it's inexplicable in that way.
As you know, we won the Horatio Alger Award, which means we came from rags to riches and been philanthropic. And the two guys that lead the core there that we have in our book is, one is Quincy Jones, who got kicked out of school at 13 for being uneducable, and yet made Michael Jackson and a lot of other people and We Are the World and Hands Across America great. And then the other guy, which we're closer to, is a little guy who made Barbra Streisand and Whitney Houston and on and on and on. You know, very famous, and David Foster. And David also left school at 13, being not very educable. And yet, here's the point that we're making about destiny that fits exactly what you're saying. David has told us when we were having dinner one night and drinks after a Horatio event that music comes to him in the middle of the night, like when he writes the Whitney Houston song. And what happens is, remember, because he didn't do well in school, that wasn't his destiny. And luckily, he got in the right energy orbit. And the same with Quincy, got under the energy orbit of Ray Charles and helped orchestrate him. And it's amazing, because every one of us has a destiny, and school may, for some people, be a deterrent rather than an asset to their ascent.
Absolutely. I have to go back because I enjoyed all of that, but Mark had mentioned that he lost $2 million in one day. I think that's what you said.
Yes.
So we're going back to your personal stories of asking questions and how that had an impact on your lives.
It's everything. So it's 1974. I'd been in graduate school with arguably the smartest guy on the planet at the time, Bucky Fuller, who invented geodesic domes, thousands of things, 40 major books, 15 doctorates at Harvard, Einstein's best student. And he blew me away. I just was so humbled to get to work for him as a research assistant. But I was building geodesic domes in New York. I built the Wall Street Racket Club, Botanical Gardens, Aviary Dome. Problem, I'm building at the wrong time. 74 is a time when you couldn't get plastic, and I'm building out of PVC, polyvinyl chloride. And it was my best, worst experience, because I asked the wrong question, which we put in the book, because you can ask the wrong question, you go the wrong way. And I said, oh my God, what if I go bankrupt? I checked the book out of the library because I lost everything. How to go bankrupt by yourself. And for 6 months, I'm sleeping in front of another guy's bedroom in a sleeping bag. That's how bad it was. But I kept asking myself, what is basically now what we're defined as what is my destiny? And I said, I want to talk to people that care about things that matter, that make a life-changing difference. Wow. I go to my 3 roommates. I'm living in Hicksville, Long Island, New York, at breakfast. And I say, guys, you know, anyone that's young, that's speaking and making money, that's not a lawyer, not a doctor, not a celebrity, not a Broadway star. And I said, yeah. Here's my ticket today. There's a young kid, a few years older than you, out in Hauppauge, Long Island, New York. I'm not going. Here, take my ticket, and you get to hear him talk to all the real estate people. Well, I raced my little beat-up Volkswagen at the bankruptcy court and not taken out to Hauppauge. 3 hours, this guy who later became my great mastermind partner friend, Chip Collins, wowed the audience. I mean, I just was mesmerized. I didn't know somebody could do what he did. And I'd never seen it quite that way before. And everybody loved him, was thrilled. After he's all done, I walk up to him, shake hands, and I say, can I ask you to go to lunch with me and teach me how to do what you're going to do? You did. He said, look, kid, chance you make it is 1 in 1,000. You ain't going to make it, so go do real work. He said, I said, no, let me make that determination. He said, okay, you stay out of the real estate business. I own this 5 boroughs of New York, and I don't want you messing with it because you may be good. But I'll teach you how to do it, and you do it in life insurance, which is a bottomless pit for and need for motivation. So I said, fine, tell me the questions, tell me everything. I wrote notes copiously. First 3 years, I did 1,000 talks a year, which when Tony Robbins and I met one time and did the meetings together, he said, you and I are the only two that have ever done 1,000 talks a year. Massive. If you want massive success, you got to take massive right action, the right result, and keep asking yourself, where do you go next? And I was pretty good at that. But then the audience kept saying, yeah, that story in a book. So the first book I did was called Stand Up, Speak Out, and Win. And I tripled my income that year by selling a $10 self-published book from the audience. Little audiences, 6 guys, and I'm doing 4 a day, 20, never more than 50. But I sold 20,000 copies at $10 each. That's $200,000. Today, that's like $2 million. I mean, why that's important now is that everybody out there can solve their own problem by doing what they're supposed to do to get to their destiny, by asking themselves, how do I unfold it? How do I pivot? It doesn't matter that I'm trained as a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, an Indian chief, a nurse, or whatever, right? What is it you're supposed to do? Because there's some great challenge that every one of us can do if you just ask yourself the right questions, to ask yourself to get going in the right direction so you get the right result right now.
And I know that Crystal got married very early. And tell us how asking the right questions helped you.
Right. So Andy, I was one of those kids who found high school to be kind of easy and kind of boring. So I ended up
the opposite of Quincy Jones.
Everyone has a different path, right? But I wanted out like he did. So I accelerated my curriculum and graduated at age 16 and married my boyfriend who was 5 years older. Not a great life plan, but I just thought I was so wise and worldly. So 2.5 years later, I find myself divorced with a baby on my hip in a new city, no family, no friends, and no idea how I was going to support myself. So I did the only thing I could think of at the time, and that was to apply for food stamps. So I remember standing in the line at the grocery store that day, getting ready to turn those food stamps over for my food and diapers. And I had this incredible epiphany. And for a second, it was like time stood still and I felt like this light was shining on my head. And a question dropped into my mind. And it was like, how did I get here? Followed by an immediate question that was, are you doing everything you can to get out of this situation, or are you taking the easy way out? And I knew the second my mind asked that question of myself, I knew the answer was no. I was not doing everything I could. I knew I wasn't tapping into all my resources. I didn't even know what that was, but I knew I wasn't doing my best. So I had this instantaneous pivot. By the time I turned the stamps over to the woman, I was like, this will not be my future. I'm saying that to myself. And I went back to my little apartment where I was getting eviction notices every month. And, I didn't have any answers. So I just kept asking questions. I was like, who would hire me? What could I do? How could I earn money tomorrow? And then suddenly I remembered hearing about temp service agencies like Kelly Girls on the radio. So I called them up, asked them how I applied. They gave me the instructions, put down any work experience you had. Fortunately, I had worked in my father's law offices, and I worked at very young at a clothing store, the coolest clothing store in my town, because I loved working. When I was 14, I worked at Taco Time because I lied and said I was 15 because I really wanted to have a job and have my own money. So anyhow, they started sending me these jobs. You could say yes or no. The assignment was 2 weeks and this one's 4 days or something like that. Then I realized there were other agencies, so I applied for all of them so I'd have the best choice of jobs. And I started finding it really interesting. I was filling in attorneys' offices and working at conventions, doing sales and just all kinds of things like that. And I started learning a lot about myself, realizing that I love people. I love, working with people, and I especially love sales. So at that point, I decided to put myself through real estate school. I had made enough money. Meanwhile, someone had approached me and said, you should consider doing some modeling. So I thought, what do I have to lose? I'll go ask. I went asked the largest modeling agency in my town if they would hire me, my city, and if they would sign me. And they did, fortunately. And I luckily was able to get some commercials that ended up going national. So literally a little more than a year and a half from that time, I was turning over my food stamps to the cashier. I'm now working for the largest home builder in our valley as a licensed realtor. I became the #1 realtor for the company, and I'm also getting paid residual income. And I have these Screen Actors Guild benefits because I made enough income that I qualified for those benefits. So my son and I have the best insurance possible. And I often thought back about that moment, that it would have been so easy for me to slide further into my victimization. I mean, I had every reason to feel sorry for myself. I was a very young mother all by myself, didn't know what to do. But I was so thankful. And I reviewed that in my mind again and again. What did I do that stopped it? When I asked that hard question of myself, and that was, are you doing everything you can to get out of this? Right? Or are you taking the easy way out? And I think not only asking the question, but I'm thankful that I was able to answer it with some honesty. I think you have to answer those questions with courage and honesty because sometimes we have to parent ourselves in a way. We have to ask those tough questions of ourselves and to be very, very honest with our answers. And if we're willing to do that, we can pivot our lives. We can change direction. We can move out of a really undesirable situation into something that is so much more magnificent than we imagined possible.
Both of you have so many incredible stories, and you've met really impressive people. You've developed relationships and friendships. Have there been times that you were afraid to ask the question or didn't even know what question to ask?
Just spontaneously, I'll say yes for both of us. And there are times when I'll just do one that I've never done before. And that is, we're in Hawaii and we own a little company there called Natural Power Concepts. And they're booming right now with devices that are really cool for energy. But we get called by an attorney because we're in a legal case at the moment. And the attorney fires us. And we just climbed. We're both mountain climbers, and we just climbed Diamond Head. If that Diamond Head intimately, I'm sure you've climbed it a few times yourself. And we're down at the picnic table, and this lady's calling us and saying, on a Saturday, wasn't it?
Yes.
You guys are fired. And I go, yikes, we're in a case. This is not, she didn't like me. She thought I was too flamboyant or too obstreperous. How's that? I'll do a nice word about myself. Obstreperous, is that pronounced right? Anyhow, so what happened is that we got, because we were in another business case, that we called that attorney and said, do you have anyone else that could take this over? The next person took it over, and not I won one, but won twice, and won twice as much. It was amazing. The best thing she did for us was fire us. But at first I go, oh my God, I just got an arrow through my soul because the case is almost over, and now we're going to have to start all over again and pay all that money a second time. And you can't ask lawyers, I guess, for a refund, even though they're incompetent and not nice.
Right. And she dropped the case because, Mark was really pushing her to do her work and not take these big breaks, these big vacations where we'd have to recap the whole case again. And I think he got a little firm about it. So that was a difficult time. But in terms of, not knowing the right question to ask, I think we struggle with that like anyone else. But we keep at it. We keep asking. We keep trying to figure it out, And asking others is a very difficult thing. We talk about that in the book. We seem to have an easier time of it than some people, but that we determined there are 7 roadblocks to asking, and we found out that most people carry at least one, if not maybe more, of these roadblocks because asking is hard sometimes, especially asking something of someone else.
So, besides starting a podcast, how can people become better question askers? Like, podcasting seems to be the perfect training ground, but for our listeners who don't want to launch a podcast, how can you get better? And I guess really specifically, how can we teach ourselves to ask more boldly? How do we push ourselves?
I love that. The challenge is to do that. And our book does exactly that. Ask, the bridge from your dreams to your destiny. We're saying, look, don't buy one book when you go to Amazon, buy 2 and maybe 3, but get your best partner that's willing to do this and go through every question in the book. And as you ask each other, they will implode into your very soul and beingness. So you'll be able to ask yourself, ask others, and ask God with great wisdom, because we tested all this before we did it. And then, as you know, not only did we write everything we know, but then we tested it against Harvard and Stanford and Cambridge. And, luckily we knew those people. But then we tested one more bigger level. We tested with the 26 biggest askers that we know. Like before we started the show, Weiland, who is just, an amazing guy, because here's a guy who came out of nowhere with club feet. I don't know if you know that or not, but he was born with club feet. And a mother that had 5 kids and a husband that died. And so she's struggling to get along in Detroit, Michigan at the time. And this kid is painting sidewalks, painting everything that doesn't move, and selling little paintings for 10 cents and then $10 and then $25, and kept raising his rates. And finally, the March of Dimes, luckily, paid to have his feet done. And then I was head of the March of Dimes. I've done charities all my life and believe everyone has an obligation to give back 10% of their thinking, time, talent, treasures. and be thankful for doing it. And I'd been on with some great movie stars, and I called who I'm on the board. We're on the board of his company, and I said, Wyland, you had them help you. They've never helped me. Would you be chairman? He said, not only am I going to be chairman, but I'm going to be bigger. Tell me the number of money you raised. And I said, here's how many multiple millions we raised. He said, I'm raising more. That's all there is to it. Whatever you raised isn't enough. And I said, that's exactly the feeling, and I will be your sub-support. He is just that kind of guy. And when he was going to get to paint the Great Wall of China before we went over, and we were having a board meeting, I said, what's the biggest thing we could do to make the biggest impact? And I said, let's paint 10 miles of the Great Wall of China, and we'll have 3 kids help paint, because he loves painting with kids. 3 from Zimbabwe, all at the end, to Afghanistan to Zimbabwe. And we did that, and they put canvas over the Great Wall of China. And it was an amazing thing. And now the guy says, because he is, like Crystal told you before we started, married to the oceans, and literally and figuratively, and I've been diving with him everywhere, but said, hey, look, what is the impact? He said, look, Mark, I got to on-invent plastic. And I said, look, I got a company that I'm part of that is doing that, because we've got to get the plastic out of the oceans, because the plastic gets in the gills of fish, kills the fish. We kill the fish, we kill the ocean, we kill us, because we all need water. I know that's pretty verbose, but did it make sense?
That makes sense. And I love that story and the impact. Also, I'm impressed that, well, no surprise, Mark is the masterful salesman, because before the podcast, I would have bought 1 book, and now I'm going to buy 3. He tells me I've got to buy 3 books.
Well, by the way, let me tell you the third one, where the people have told us they want to give it is libraries have no more money because they've been closed down and people aren't contributing. So people are saying, I want your book, but I haven't got any money. Can I go to the library and get it? So I said, look, I can't. There's 16,000 libraries, and God bless Andrew Carnegie for starting. Give one to a library. And so then they got one. So that would be where I'd ask you to give one of your 3 books, sir, with all respect.
You mentioned rags to riches and philanthropy. Why is that important to you?
I believe we believe everything's a triangle. My teacher, Bucky Fuller, said universe is triangulating, but you got to learn, earn, and then return. So every one of us has an obligation to learn all we can, earn all we can, and then return all we can, and do the most good and the least harm. And we got 4 billion people that are not in the intellectual awareness equation. And I've got some real ways that probably too much more for this podcast to go into deep. But back when I was with Bucky, I wrote my 100-year goals. And a lot of them are coming to pass now. And obviously, Elon Musk wrote his 100-year goals. And the richest guys in the world all wrote their 100-year goals. And yet, most Americans, goal setting, and I've written a whole book on that, of course, called Future Diary. But for most people, goal setting is, well, what am I going to do after lunch? No, that's not your goal. And goal setting isn't on New Year's Day, because most people's New Year's goals are gone way before February. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. That didn't work, so I'll get that one. No, you got to write stuff that matters. And like Crystal said to you very clearly and eloquently a minute ago, you've got to have an accountability partner.
So this is not destiny, and then there's no work to be done. One does have to be very intentional and deliberate about outlining goals and figuring out where you want to go.
Beautifully said.
That's exactly right. And in that asking yourself part, Andy, we say there are like 3 critical phases to that. Where am I now? And all the little sub questions that come after that. Do I like what's happening? Am I contributing? All these things? And where do I want to be? Because you need to get a vision. Ask that question from the nth degree. Where do I want to be? Imagine yourself in that ultimate state. And then the final part of that is, what specific action do I need to take to get there? And those are 3 phases of questions that if you utilize those, they will keep taking you forward. But you do have to put your asking journey into motion in the physical world. We live in this physical material world. You have to pick up the phone. You have to move forward. You have to, come together with people. All of that is so important. And asking is something that bonds people together. It's such a beautiful thing.
I love that. Well, it's a practice that all of us have to be, I think, more thoughtful about. And what I find interesting is reading through your book, I feel like it's a skill that one can improve and get better at. But the funny thing is that it's almost like, if there's simplicity, it's almost becoming more childlike and just being present in the moment. It's like, get out of your own head and just be like a child. Be naturally inquisitive and curious, and really good things will come to you.
Oh my gosh, so beautifully stated. And we talk about that, because we all come into this world so beautiful as children. We're so uncorrupted in our ability to ask. We are not afraid to ask. We ask who, what, when, where, why, how, endlessly, right? And we also are not afraid to ask for more, or to ask for everything we want, because that is our little human spirit trying to evolve. That is exactly how we evolve. If children were not able to ask those questions, they wouldn't grow. And that's why they grow and develop at such an accelerated rate. And then depending on how we were parented, what happened in our schooling experience, in our job experience, basic life rejection, you're told to, okay, quit asking questions. I'm tired of hearing from you. Don't ask any questions unless you're called upon, or your opinions aren't valued at your job, whatever. Suddenly we find ourselves as adults, where that beautiful natural ability to ask has been crushed out of us, where that wild curiosity, that unashamed curiosity is stifled. And we're standing there as adults, scared to death to ask someone, because we might be rejected, or they might look at us as stupid or unworthy, or we're afraid as adults not to have all the answers. How sad is that? There's no way any of us can have all the answers. And so we're just encouraging everybody to take this asking journey with us, and really take a new, fresh look at your life through the lens of how you can become a master asker, and how your life will continue to expand dimensionally, just like Michaela's life.
Andy, can I go back to your question about bold, please?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Crystal to do it, because what happened is I did one of the giant churches in the Midwest. I mean, it was packed, thousands and thousands of people. And then this guy just wrote us a letter right before the book got published, Charlie Green. I'm going to have Crystal tell it, because it's a little too self-aggrandizing if I do it.
No, so it is a great example of how Mark is such a bold asker. And I think it's really one of those skills that he was just naturally born with. So it's important for people to understand how to be that way. Charlie wrote this story, like Mark said, he sent us a letter before, as we were doing the book. So at the timing was perfect. But he said, Mark, you may not know this, but I saw you for the first time at this big church in the Midwest. I saw you give this beautiful service before the Chicken Soup series ever came out. And he said, you gave us this amazing talk, and all of us were touched and inspired by it. And then when you were finished with the talk, you stood up and you waved this manuscript around and said, this is my book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. And we're trying to get a publisher for it. And I'm asking you to stand up and pray with me that we'll get the right publisher, and we'll sell 1 million copies of this book. So everyone was just really lit up by his talk. And so, of course, they got up and they prayed that this book was going to sell, 1 million copies and get published. And then Mark said, and I have another thing to ask you. I've printed these order forms, and I'm asking you to fill one out and put your credit card down, so that when I do get this book published, I will send you that book immediately. And Charlie said, it was the most amazing thing to see all of us fill out our credit cards because Mark asked us to. And he said, I don't think anyone said no. And he said, part of it was Mark had given so much value, and I think that's part of something we need to remember, is not just to be a bold asker, but always to remember that sort of asking, that value circle, there's that value wheel. Always make sure you're giving a lot, and to balance what you're asking for, and not even necessarily at the same time and place. Sometimes it works out like that. But I think I believe truly the universe has a perfect accounting system. So if you're a giver, if you're giving a lot of yourself, you cannot be afraid to ask. You need to ask. You need to feel comfortable asking. And you need to feel comfortable giving. And we have a section in the book that talks about that, being a grantor of wishes, because that's the other half of the circle, right? It's so amazing to be able to grant someone's wish, to be able to fulfill that request that they're asking. That's what we're here for as human beings.
I love that idea. And I think that so many of us have to come out of our shells and push ourselves, because there's so many instances where you're shy and you don't want to make waves, or you don't want to upset somebody. But I think experience teaches us that most of the time when you ask a question, you have little to lose. People can just say no, and then that's fine. You can move on and ask another question. So I'll just share this one quote from your book. Good question asking takes mentorship, learning, and practice to be mastered. So it's something that we need to keep working on. Mark and Crystal, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
How do I define success? I define success as feeling like every day is fulfilling and joyful. I mean, I love to just feel at the end of the day, whether I've worked hard, no matter how hard I've worked or what I've done, that I'm just very fulfilled. I mean, living a fulfilled life is what success is to me, truly. It's not just about money. Money is great. I mean, money, I'm not ashamed of money. Money's great. It lets you do more good. It lets you have more, influence, all that. It makes life easier, a little more freedom. But I think true success is that fulfillment you get from being on that right path.
I would agree. And I'd say that success is a fulfillment of your macro destiny and your micro destinies. And that would be daily destinies. Like right now, our destiny is to make this a mega best-selling book, and I think it'll be bigger than the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, which has sold 500 million books, which no one's ever done. But remember, my original goal was to sell 1 billion books, and I'm going to live to be 127th options for renewal. So while I've got critics that say, look, come on, Mark, go talk to Andy. He's going to tell you can't do that. But I don't think Andy's going to tell me if I can do it. Because look what I've done. I'm halfway to goal, and I'm only halfway through life. So I think we're gaining momentum on it. How's that?
I love it. And, well, that's incentive to make it to 127. You've got work to do.
Exactly.
By the way, just as a quick aside, we just watched on Netflix the near-death experience, and every one of the 20,000 people that came back and got interviewed, every one of them had exactly the same line. When they were told they had to come back, they said, you got work to do on the Earth plane yet. How's that grab you?
Yep. So purpose matters. It reminds me of, I interviewed Amy Jo Martin on episode 42, and she has a phrase that she uses frequently, which is where your purpose, passion, and skill collide, bliss resides. So you're trying to figure out and bring all those things together so that you can make the biggest impact. Well, thank you so much, Mark and Crystal, for sharing your story and your tips for asking better questions. Tell the Inspired Money listener where they can find out more and get your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place is just Amazon.com. It's at Barnes & Noble too. You could go to either Barnes & Noble or Amazon. Just everybody has their Prime account usually. So, and Amazon delivers all over the world. So that's handy. It comes in all forms, audiobook, Kindle. So, whatever your preference is. And it's a beautiful hardbound book too. I love hardbound books. I just love substantive books. So anyhow, when you buy the book, please join our book club. We're going to be hosting a book club. We'd love to send you an invitation. Go to askthebookclub.com so we can invite you to it. We want to be a support for people in their asking journeys. And so we just want to have this incredible discussion and figure out how we can take this asking journey forward together.
And make everyone a master asker so they get to be bold, confident, and super successful.
Yeah, and make a big impact.
Make a big impact. And please look for us. Follow us on social media, Crystal Dwyer Hansen, bit of a tongue twister. And then, of course, Mark Victor Hansen on, everything. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. Yeah.
I will put that all in the show notes. Thank you so much, Crystal. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Delighted to be with you. Thank you. We love being uninspired money.
Yes.
Now I'm going to have to take that clip and blast it everywhere.
Good.